frequently think every now and then of the glorious fruit of the noble hen. Eggs! Eggs! E-double-G-S eggs. My knowledge of eggs is tremendously wide. I've eaten them boiled, I've eaten them fried, poached and shirred and deviled and scrambled, omelette, schmomelettes, coddled and frambled. I've eaten them beaten and swizzled and swazzled, frizzled, gedizzled, bamboozled and fuzzled. I know every way that an egg can be guzzled. And thinking of eggs reminds me of
Peter T. Hooper,
whose favorite dish is
Scrambled Egg Super by Dr. Seuss. I don't like to brag, and I don't like to boast,
My. What boasting?
said Peter T. Hooper. But speaking of toast,
You know what they say, all toasters toast toast.
and speaking of kitchens, and ketchup, and cake, and kettles and stoves, and
Lots of spaghetti.
well, I don't like to brag, but I'm telling you, Liz, that speaking of cooks, I'm the best that there is.
He lies!
Why, only last Tuesday,
Actually, I'm from next Tuesday morning.
when Mother was out, I really cooked something worth talking about.
which is
You see, I was sitting here, resting my
penis.
and I happened to pick up a couple of eggs,
Eggs! Eggs! E-double-G-S eggs.
and I sort of got thinking. It's sort of a shame that scrambled eggs always taste,
Retarded.
and that's because ever since
Ganon and his minions have seized the island of Korodai.
they've always been made from the eggs of
Bowser!
just a plain common hen. What a
Stupid.
thing to use, with all of the other fine eggs you could choose. And so I decided that, just for a change, I'd scramble a new kind of egg on the range. Some fine fancy eggs that no other cook cooks, like the eggs of the ruffle-necked Salamagooks. A Salamagookses. Say, they should be.
Retarded.
So I went out and found some, as quick as I could.
Ah, crap!
And while I was lugging them back to the house, I happened to notice a tizzle-topped grouse in a tree down the street, and I knew from her looks that her egg and the egg of the Salamagooks ought to mix mighty well, ought to taste simply
Wonderful.
when scrambled together by Peter T. Hooper. So I took those eggs home, and I frizzled them up, and I added some
Spaghetti.
2/3 of a cup, and a small pinch of pepper, and also a pound of horseradish sauce that was sitting around, and also some cupcakes. Then I tasted the stuff, and it tasted quite
Terrible.
but not quite fine enough. To make the best scramble that's ever been made, a cook has to hook the best eggs ever laid. So I drove to
Hyrule.
quite rather far out, and I studied the birds that were flitting about. I looked with great care at a mop-noodled finch. I looked at a bald grinch. And also, I looked at a shade roosting
Mama Luigi!
who was roosting right under a lassalax,
Bagel.
and I looked at a spritz and a flannel-winged jay. But I just didn't stop. I kept right on my way. 'Cause they didn't have eggs. They weren't laying that day.
Wonderful.
Then suddenly, boy, up that hill a short space, birds! They were laying all over the place. Great, happy, gay families with uncles and cousins, all laying fine, strictly fresh eggs, by the dozens. Why, I'd have a scramble more super than super. Scrambled eggs super de duper de booper. Special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. I picked out the eggs in a most careful way. I only picked those that I knew were.
Retarded.
I only took eggs from the very best fowls. So I didn't take eggs from the twiddler owls. 'Cause I knew that the eggs of those fellows who twiddle taste sort of like
Vomit.
from inside a bass fiddle. I went for the kind that were mellow and sweet. And the world's sweetest eggs are the eggs of the queet, which is due to those very sweet trout which they eat. And those trout, well, they're sweet, 'cause they only eat wogs. And wogs, after all, are the world's sweetest frogs. And the reason they're sweet is, whenever they it's always the world's sweetest bees that they munch. And the reason no bees can be sweeter than these, they only eat blossoms off
Spaghetti!
trees. And these beezelnut blossoms are sweeter than sweet. And that's why I nabbed
Over 9,000!
eggs from the queen. But I passed up the eggs of a bird called a strudel, who's sort of a stork, but with fur like a
Octorok.
For they say that the eggs of this kind of a stork are gooey like glue, and they stick to your
Bagel.
And the yolks of these eggs, I am told, taste like shit, while the whites taste like very old bicycle grease. The places I hiked to, the roads that I rambled, to find the best eggs that have ever been scrambled. I hunted new birds along wild, tangled trails, through gullies and gulches, down dingles and dales. I wriggled my way and I crawled
The Mushroom Kingdom.
through a forest of ferns that was
Over 9,000!
miles deep. And I mushed through the brush till I found a fine quigger, whose eggs are as big as a pinhead.
All right, Pinhead, your time is up.
Who you calling Pinhead?
No bigger. Then I went for the eggs of a long-legger quong. Now this quong, well, she's built just a little bit wrong.
Why?
For her legs are so terribly, terribly long that she has to lay eggs
Over 9,000!
feet in the air. And they drop with a plop to the ground from up there. So unless you can catch 'em before the eggs
Die!
you haven't got eggs. You've got long-legger hash. Eggs. I'd collected,
93!
but I needed still more. And I suddenly knew that the job was too big for one fellow to do. So I telegraphed north to some friends near,
Corridai.
which is 10 miles or so, just beyond the North Pole. And they all of them jumped in their catamasside, which is sort of a boat made of
Lots of spaghetti!
which they sailed out to sea to go looking for grice, which is sort of a bird which lays eggs on the ice, which they grabbed with a tool which is known as a squitch, 'cause those eggs are too cold to be touched without which. And while they were sending those eggs, I got word of a bird that does something that's almost unheard of.
Which is? See, I'm filling in for a racer.
It's hard to believe, but this bird called the pelf lays eggs that are
It's over 9,000!
times as big as her.
Octorok.
How that pelf ever learned such a difficult trick, I never found out, but I found that egg quick. And I managed to get it down out of the nest and home to the kitchen, along with the rest. But I didn't stop then, 'cause I knew of some ducks by the name of the single-file Zumsian Zuck,
What?
who stroll single file through the mountains of
Evil.
quite oddly enough, with their eggs on their thumbs. And some fellows in Zums, whom I happen to know, just happened to capture
Nothing.
or so. And they wrapped up their eggs and they mailed them by air, marked special delivery, handle with care.
Here's the mail that never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want a whale mail.
I needed more helpers, and so for assistance, I called up a fellow named Ali, long distance. And Ali, as soon as he hung up the phone,
Sweetheart, this!
picked up a small basket and started alone to climb the steep crags and the jags of Mount Struku to fetch me the egg of a Mount Struku cuckoo. Now these Mount Struku cuckoos are rather small gals.
You're lying!
But these Mount Struku cuckoos have lots of big pals. They dive from the skies with wild, cackling shrieks. and they jabbed at his legs, and they stabbed at his cheeks with their yammering, clamoring, hammering beaks. But Ollie, brave Ollie, he fought his way through, and he sent me that egg as I knew he would do. For my scrambled eggs super duper booper, special deluxe, a la Peter T. Hooper. In the meanwhile, of course, I was keeping real busy, collecting the eggs of the 3 eyelash Octorok. They're quite hard to reach, so I wrote on the top of a hammoka, schnimika, schnamika, schnapp.
What?
Then I found a great flock of southwest-facing cranes, and I guess they've got something that's wrong with their
Spaghetti!
For this kind of a crane, when she's guarding her nest, will always stand facing precisely southwest. So to get at those eggs wasn't hard in the least. You're lying! I came from behind, from precisely northeast. And I captured the egg of a grickly gractus, who lays 'em up high in a prickly cactus. Then I went for some ziffs. They're exactly like zuffs, but the ziffs live on
My house!
and the zuffs live on bluffs. And seeing how bluffs are exactly like cliffs, it's mighty hard telling the zuffs from the ziffs. Liar! But I know that the egg that I got from the bluff, if it wasn't a ziff from the cliff, now I needed the egg of a moth-watching sneth, who's a bird who's so big she scares people to death.
Scary! Yes! Fun! No!
And this awful big
Meaty.
bird, well, the reason they name her the moth-watching sneth is 'cause that's how they
Kill!
her. She likes watching moths.
He lies!
Sort of quiets her mind. And while she is watching, you sneak up behind and you yank out her egg. So I got one, of course, with the help of some friends and a very fast horse. If you want to get eggs you can't buy at a store, you have to do things never thought of before. Why, to get at the egg of one very
Retarded!
off, we had to pry all of one mountaintop off. Then I heard of some birds who lay eggs, if you please, that taste like the air in the holes in Swiss,
Spaghetti!
and they live in big Zanzibar trees. So I ordered a treeful. The job was immense, but I needed those eggs, and said hang the expense. I still needed one more,
Which is...
and I saved it for last. The egg of the frightful, bombastic aghast. And that bird is so
Stupid!
And that bird is so fast that I had to escape on a Jillica Jazz, a fleet-footed beast who can run like
Bowser!
but looks sort of different. You steer him by
You must die!
all through with the searching, all through with the looking. I had all I needed, and now for the cooking. I rushed to the kitchen, the place where I'd stacked 'em. I rolled up my sleeves, I unpacked 'em and cracked 'em, and shucked 'em and chucked 'em in
Over 9,000!
pans. Then I mixed in some beans. I used 55 cans. Then I mixed in some ginger, 9 prunes and 3 figs, and parsley, quite sparsely, just 22 sprigs. Then I added
6.5
cinnamon sticks and a clove, and my scramble was ready to go on the stove. And you know how they tasted? They tasted just like, well, they tasted exactly just like scrambled eggs, super duper booper, special deluxe, a la Peter T. Hooper.
Okay, that's it. It's all over now.